Ever since season 2 of Amazon Prime's Lord of the Rings series, The Rings of Power premiered, there's been some debate about whether or not the show is doing better or worse than the previous season. And up until this point, we really haven't had much to go off of, but we're starting to get some viewership figures in. And right now, it's not looking like it's too good for the Amazon Prime series. We have this article from Forbes that came out a couple days ago. Headline, Rings of Power viewership indicates perhaps Amazon shouldn't commit to 5 seasons, basically saying that they won't have enough audience if they carried this on that long, judging by how quickly they're losing their viewers. The numbers are plainly terrible. Luminate, the firm estimating the viewership, says that season 2 debuted behind Netflix's worst ever true crime series, but the details, Rings of Power season 1's Labor Day premiere of 132 minutes of 2 episodes brought in 1.2 billion minutes watched in 4 days. Rings of Power Season 2's premiere of 3 episodes totaling 204 million minutes brought in 553.5 million minutes watched in the first 4 days. That's less than half, even with an extra episode to watch, and reports from other firms like Samba TV indicate similar figures. 1.8 million households for Season 1, down to 900,000 for Season 2. And I made a video a couple days ago talking about the Samba TV figures, but I did mention within that video that those are third-party sites. They don't necessarily have the numbers that Amazon has, so you could take it with a pinch of salt. But I did say, however, that according to Samba TV's methodology and also apparently Luminate's methodology, that we're seeing a decrease in viewership between the 2 seasons. But now we're starting to get some viewership figures in from Amazon, and while on the surface, these figures actually look good, if you examine them a little more closely, you can see that it pretty much confirms what those other third-party sites have been saying. Lord of the Rings of Power Season 2 gaining steam with 40 million viewers in first 11 days. So obviously that's a positive spin on this whole issue, but you really have to look into it like I was just saying. In the 11 days since it premiered, the second installment has amassed 40 million viewers with 4 episodes currently available. Jennifer Salke, head of Amazon MGM Studios, revealed in an internal memo to staff on Tuesday it has been number 1 on Prime Video globally, and it is now of the streamer's top 5 TV seasons of all time in terms of total viewership through 11 days, Salke says. Okay, so obviously that sounds fine, but just take a look at this right here when you start comparing what we're seeing with Season 2 versus what we've seen with Season 1 of The Rings of Power. As Deadline previously reported, Rings of Power has struggled to match the audience it wrangled in the first season, down around 50% in its debut weekend, according to data from Samba TV. When Season 1 debuted, Amazon touted that the series had tallied more than 25 million viewers in the first day, indicating that it likely hit the 40 million mark much faster than Season 2. Just let that simmer for a second now, because other third-party sites were saying the viewership decline, like Samba TV here is saying it's probably around the 50% decline from the first season. But right now they're saying they got 40 million viewers after 11 days for the first 4 episodes. That means it's around 10 million on average per episode. Meanwhile, Season 1 of Rings of Power brought in 25 million viewers on the first episode on the first day alone, which indicates the viewership decline for Season 1 and Season 2 is well more than 50%. And no matter how you try to slice it, that's not a good sign for, like, yes, maybe 10 million viewers for the first episode or 10 million views averaging per episode is not necessarily a bad thing. But when you think about how much they actually spent on this show and then seeing that kind of decline, no wonder they're talking about in the Forbes article that they're not going to be around long enough for Season 5, because by that time there'll pretty much be no one left in the audience if they're losing half the audience each season. It is common for a series to lose some of its audience between seasons, especially given there were 2 years in between Rings of Power, and has been faced with a steeper than usual decline, though it is entirely possible that it will reclaim some of the audience by the end of the season. And yes, there are some people who may actually come back to the season, or maybe some people are just waiting to binge watch the whole thing. But still, I don't think it's tens of millions of people waiting to binge watch it. Likely, though, there's going to be a lot of people who just checked out after the first season. And that's kind of what I said in my previous video talking about it, where I think what we're seeing right now is basically a lot of people were curious about a Lord of the Rings series, so they tuned in from the watch it on the first season and they checked out. That's why we saw around it was like a 63% drop off from the people who actually watched the first episode between the people who watched the last episode, because they saw it, didn't like what it was offering, and then they checked out and they just haven't come back. Meanwhile, the only people who seem to show up for season 2 of the Rings of Power are people who are willing to actually stay through the whole first season of it. So presumably those are people who actually liked it, but the vast majority of the audience has pretty much said goodbye to it already. And it looks like that's kind of where we're sitting at right now. And you know what? This is entirely foreseeable too, because a lot of people were seeing what they were trying to do with Rings of Power and trying to go against the Tolkien lore and insert their own identity politics in it, because the creators of it wanted to appeal to the modern audience and things like that. But we've seen this time and time again with a lot of other beloved franchises, that when they're trying to appeal to the modern audience, we see the modern audience doesn't actually show up because the modern audience doesn't exist. Or if it does exist, it's a small segment of the entire market. And if you actually want to be successful and spend $1 billion on a series like their Amazon's doing with the Rings of Power, you need to try to have mass appeal. And you don't do that by trying to appeal to the fringes on social media. You do that by doing what Peter Jackson did, which is to try to be as faithful to the source material as possible and give people something that they want, as opposed to something that you think they need to watch instead. And maybe Amazon, they're going to learn their lesson after this season and try to go back to how things should be with the Lord of the Rings. Or maybe they're just going to double and triple down on this. And then maybe next year we're going to hear like, you know what, we're going to end it after 3 seasons. And we really, even though we said we want to do 5 seasons, we always planned for a 3-season story arc, or maybe 4 seasons. Because if they don't actually do 5 seasons of this show like they initially planned, it just goes to show that they are pulling the plug on this project early. And that only means because it was an utter failure for them. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. Do you think Amazon Prime's Rings of Power is suffering as a result of this huge viewership drop off? Or do you think, no, it's fine. They're having a viewership drop off, but they can recover from this, or it's still a sizable enough portion of the audience? I'm curious what people have to say about this in the comment section. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And if you don't mind, click that like button and share the video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.